Hi everybody, David Dilling here on behalf of Markzware. And today's interview is a real special treat. We're going to have Kevin Slimp on the line. We're going to Skype him in here in a moment. Kevin was busy on Facebook, on a Facebook group. Mary Gay, a colleague of mine, shared this with me, where he was having problems with InDesign files. He used IDMarkz, Markzware standalone application, to preview, export, and convert InDesign files to other formats, or open them up again right in InDesign for people on lower versions. Or as in this case with Kevin, he had some bad, corrupt files, and Markzware's IDMarkz fixed them. We have a bad file fixing service where we fix many bad files, and IDMarkz is one of the methods we use to fix bad files. I look forward to talking to Kevin about that. And you can see down here a file that Kevin apparently, one of the files he fixed with IDMarkz, because he's also an author of many books, apart from being an InDesign expert. And he does, right now, his latest course is InDesign to Affinity Publisher, for those in the newspaper industry dabbling with Affinity Publisher. So it is very interesting. Kevin's a real expert in the newspaper industry. So let's give Kevin now a call on the Skype here. We'll get him right in. Hey, how's it going?
Good. We're connected.
Right. And Kevin, where are you located in actually?
I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay. Cool. Interview. Before we jump into IDMarkz and how you're using IDMarkz or what you've been, finding out about IDMarkz, maybe you could tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people probably know me. I've been working in the publishing world for, 25 years or more now. I guess close to 30 years now. I got started in that. I never meant to be in that world. I owned an advertising agency in the early 90s and developed a thing which got really popular, which was called the PDF printing method. And that's how everybody got started using PDF files and printing from them and all that. And that became such a big thing so quickly that the next thing I knew, I was getting invited to speak at all the major publishing conferences. And so newspaper, magazine, advertising, whatever. And I finally decided I enjoyed that a lot more than I enjoyed owning an ad agency. So I converted over to a full-time speaking and writing career for years. I think 4 years ago, I did 150 cities. And then finally slowed down. I knew that eventually I would have to do something else. And so I started a book publishing company, which is doing really well. We've become a semi-major publisher now, lots of best-selling books since then. And I still work quite a bit because I love the work. I still work quite a bit with newspapers and magazines and in all phases. But especially I enjoy the technology side of it because of my background. So as you know, yesterday I did a really big webinar with folks from all over on the new Affinity Publisher.
Right.
And so still delve into that quite a bit. Most of my life these days is in one of two areas, either working with my book company, and I'm the publisher, that means the head guy there. So that keeps me really busy. But then I probably spend probably a fourth to a third of my time still working with training and that kind of thing in the publishing world.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah. I'll just show the folks here real quick right here on the screen. This is the Markzwarebooks.com, correct?
Yeah, that's one of my companies. Yeah, sure is. Markzwarebooks.com.
Yeah. See a bunch of excellent material there. And it looks like you're one of the authors.
I actually had one. I've written a few books in my time, even before Markzware. I actually wrote one last year, or I guess it came out last year, that hit number one. On Amazon, it was number one for 5 days. So
wow.
You never know. But now the one you're looking at on there now is a fictional book.
Okay. What was your top book there? What was the name of that one?
The one that hit number one was called Where Do We Go From Here? It was a very serious book. But the one you're looking at is Who Killed A.J. Fryer. So yeah. I did a series of I did a syndicated column a few years ago that was in about 300 newspapers in North America. And it was a fictional column about a little place called Lenox Valley. And so I've written a few books based on the characters.
Yeah, I was reading that. Interesting. Very cool. So I'll look up, check out your other book. And just to show everybody here, here's your other, one of your many other sites, the Newspaper Academy, where I think that's where you do your InDesign to Affinity courses. And
that's where I do online training for newspapers,
yeah. And InDesign, Photoshop. I mean, we'll get into that in a second. Yeah. Okay, very interesting. One more question. So you helped create the PDF.
Well, long story, but I still had the letter that the CEO of Adobe wrote to me, David Shinson, at the time, for saving his company. He said, we'd be out of business without you. They had started working on this thing called the PDF, and I read about it, was really interested in it because I owned an ad agency at the time. And I thought the big thing about a PDF was you could design something on a Mac and see it on a PC. Believe it or not, that was the big thing.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote him and got to talking to the people and became good friends with a guy named Gary Cosamini, who was like the number 2 guy at Adobe at the time. And he basically told me, Kevin, this software is going nowhere. We're probably just going to drop it because it just doesn't really do much. It doesn't do much. And I said, do you mind if I took it and tweaked it and see what I could do with it? Well, the long story short is a foundation paid me to really do some research on it. And we developed what's now the PDF printing method. That was about 93, 94. We printed the first publication to print from it was a daily newspaper in 1995. But
Wow.
before then, I was working with Frank and Ernest comic strips and lots of the magazines and stuff to get them built up to that.
Amazing. Wow, that's incredible. So maybe I'll jump into the next question. I was like, obviously you have a rich, graphic design background. I guess you were a QuarkXPress user at one time, or?
Well, yeah, everything you can think of: PageMaker, QuarkXPress, InDesign. I've written manuals on just about all of them at one point or another in time.
Wow.
So, all those things.
Amazing. And now to jump a little bit more, obviously we could talk probably all day just about your background. But how did you first learn about Markzware? Do you remember when you first, obviously a while ago?
I kind of do remember. It's been a long time. I don't know how old Markzware is, but I think the company was pretty new at the time.
Probably PM to Q, PageMaker to Quark.
That's probably what it was. And anyway, they somehow I read about it, and in those days, it was like Christmas every day in my office because they used to do software reviews.
Yeah.
But anyway, they sent me their software to review. I believe her name was Mary. I think.
Mary Gay. Yeah.
And I've enjoyed knowing her over the years. We've been in contact many times since then. But she just said, "Hey, this is a great thing. Would you look at it?" And I did a review on it, and she was all excited about that. So over the years, we've stayed in touch. And so Q2ID was a big deal. I worked with InDesign before it came out on the market. So when it was K2, and so when they came out with Q2ID, even though InDesign would open Quark files, it would do a lot more.
Right.
So that was a big thing. And then there were some other programs that they did. I don't even remember what they
probably Flightcheck. You probably.
Oh yeah, Flightcheck.
Yeah, Markzware actually started the Preflight niche as it's called because of Flightcheck. Before,
we looked at that a lot because of the PDF thing, and in those days it was hard to get a PDF file that would print perfectly every time. Well, it wasn't, but it was hard for the printers to print perfectly. Yeah. And so Flightcheck helped that a lot.
Yeah, cool. All right, excellent. Okay, just to keep it moving here, I was curious about, now you've been an InDesign user obviously for years, I imagine. Now at this stage, have you looked for alternatives to InDesign in the past, or have you researched them in the past, or?
Yeah, I look at everything. So because I was doing all these reviews, everybody sent me everything. And so I've looked at a lot of things. Matter of fact, I've looked at like Affinity Publisher in the past and said it doesn't work. It won't work for you in the past. And so I think 3 years ago I wrote my first review on Affinity Publisher and said, "Hey, it's great, but it won't work for what you need to do." That's changed, but
Well, I did notice you had some older reviews on an Affinity Publisher where you were a little bit, I won't say negative, but realistic. That hey, it's cool, but it's not I'm not giving up my InDesign anytime soon, and nor should you probably, But in the meantime, it seems to have changed. So, are your impressions of Affinity Publisher now a little bit different than? Are you
Oh yeah, they're different. And like I said, I did a webinar yesterday that had a lot of people at it, and so and most of them were publishers, and so they're coming wanted to know, hey, can I get away from paying these Adobe and Quark monthly fees, and move to Affinity? And the answer was yes and no. The program's very good now, and they fixed the issues with it. The biggest issue was that it couldn't handle PDF files.
Yeah,
and so and they up until the beta. Well, actually, it still doesn't, except they have a beta now that it does. And so the beta will become the actual software. So with the beta, the PDF's not an issue anymore. So it's a really solid program. And for most people, it would do everything they'd ever need.
Right.
Now, it lacks some things. For instance, we couldn't use it in the book publishing world because it doesn't do footnotes.
Yeah.
Okay? It still doesn't handle data. It doesn't merge data nearly as well as InDesign does.
Right.
It doesn't do tables as well as InDesign Report does. It does them, and it does them fine, but it's not as quick as easy as them. But everything else I can think of, everything else, and most people will never use a table or merge a database.
Yeah.
No, for them it won't make a difference.
Right.
But if you do, you're still going to use InDesign Report.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'll put it here. I'll edit it in. I think you have a seminar you're giving sometime in January, the next one, right? About Affinity.
Yeah, January 15th. Yeah.
InDesign to Affinity. Yeah, January 15th. Okay. And where can they get more information on that? What's the webpage again?
Newspaperacademy.com.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put it in there. That looked really interesting. And like you said, there's a lot of people, because we're getting them because of IDMarkz, which you'll talk about in a second. We're hearing and seeing the people that are switching, and it's a broad range. It's for some people.
At the beginning of the webinar yesterday, I put up a poll and said, how did you end up here? Why did you end up here? And more people than anything else said, I'm interested in not having to pay monthly fees anymore.
Interesting.
And the biggest crowd was, I just heard about your webinar and it sounded interesting. So
wow.
People are interested in this Affinity software, but they're more interested in getting away from having to pay a monthly fee. So I certainly understand that. I have to pay it for all my employees, so I get it.
Yeah, very interesting. And by the way, just as as a tip, in Germany, they're completely against subscriptions. And
okay.
Yeah, really. I mean, like very, very. They're not very happy with.
Nobody likes them here, but it's reality here.
Yeah.
I understand they're making a lot of money off of them, so I don't blame them. But
yeah,
nobody likes them.
Well, that's been my thing with InDesign. I mean, we use it every day, and a lot of people I talk to in the Netherlands and other countries say, well, they're for $49 a month, hey, we're making money off of it. So there's no, yeah. But okay, Corona, COVID, how's that affected you? This year.
The pandemic's had a huge effect on me. Book sales went down about 90%.
Oh.
People think everybody went out and bought books. No, they read the books they had on their shelves.
Wow.
And book groups quit meeting, and groups that bought books. And most books are sold like ours, because ours aren't like self-published books. They're real books by famous authors. Most of those are sold at live events. If you think about it, an author goes and speaks somewhere and sells 1,000 books.
Yeah.
And then word gets out. Well, there are no live events anymore. So if we hadn't have come up with a new online division to do CEU training, that company would have gone under. But that online division saved it, so we're doing okay. I used to make at least half my income as a speaker, even a year ago. And I would speak at sometimes 100 conferences a year, 50, 60 conferences a year. Well, those are gone.
Oh.
So I have done, I started doing a lot more webinars. And so that's been a big, big help. And I've spoken virtually. I've keynoted probably a dozen conventions this year virtually,
wow.
Press conventions or different industry conventions. And so that makes up for some of it. Yeah, I would say it's made a major impact on my business. Yeah.
Wow. Sure. Yeah. That's sorry to hear. But you have,
I'm just glad we can still stay in business. I haven't lost any employees. We still pay them, and I don't always get paid, but they do. And so,
fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, very well, very nice. And well, hopefully things will pick up here. 2021's just on the horizon. So,
It already is. Yeah, we're seeing it pick up quite a bit now. So, yeah.
Now, Mary Gay, she shared with me, she saw a post you had on, I think it was a Facebook group or something, where you had told your fellow followers there about how you used IDMarkz to get you out of a jam. But that was very interesting. Yeah.
She saw that. Just a Facebook post.
Yeah. So what can you revamp that story?
Well, I have a few thousand designers that follow me on Facebook. So every now and then, if I just see things that will be helpful to them, I just tell them real quick. And that wasn't a story or a column or anything like that. I just popped up there and said, hey, I want to let you know something real quick. I had an InDesign file that wouldn't open. It said it was corrupt. And then I had another one that wouldn't open. I said, well, that happens every now and then,
Yeah.
And always a huge issue. You got to figure out and often you can't open them up or whatever. And I just got to thinking, how can I fix this? How can I fix this? And I thought, the first thing I tried was the new the new Markzware program. And I thought, I wonder. So I opened it up and I told it to take this InDesign file and convert it to an InDesign file, which it actually converts it to an IDML file.
Right, in between, yeah.
And it opened up an InDesign. And I've had to do that 3 or 4 times since then. And it's because of an issue. It's not a big issue, but because of all the new versions of InDesign that have been coming out lately, it can been updating a lot. It's causing confusion between the application.
Right.
But that's worked every time.
Wow. Yeah, that was really cool to read that, because we fix bad files as a service for, just as a service because of our technology the engineers here have made.
I don't think I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah. And we fix a lot of people in desperate need, huge InDesign files. And there's some there's some things people shouldn't do, like dragging and dropping images from an internet page into your InDesign document.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's amazing InDesign allows it.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. Yeah.
And then their file gets to be like 3 gigabyte, and then it crashes and never opens again. And
Yeah.
But one of the ways to fix them is IDMarkz, which some of the times works, like you saw. So
yeah. It was great, and I put that in there. People thanked me just like crazy because everybody has problems with that. And I said, just buy it because if it saves one file, it's worth it. I think it was $99 or something like that.
Yeah,
probably worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Very interesting. What was your first impressions of IDMarkz? I mean, the use. How
it's great. It does just what it's supposed to do, which has been my experience with all the Markzware products. It just does what it's supposed to do. It's not fancy. It's not flashy. You open it up. You say, hey, take this InDesign file, do this with it, and it does it. And so, in my case, I just wanted to test it to see how it worked, and it worked well. But I especially wanted to test it because I knew I'd be reviewing all this Affinity software.
Right.
So I wanted to see how to do it, and it's really incredible. And, I don't work for you guys, so I wouldn't lie to you. But it's really incredible. You take an InDesign file, you convert it to an Affinity file, to a Publisher file, and it opens up in Publisher most of the time exactly the way it looked in InDesign. I want to say most of the time, sometimes letters move.
Yeah.
And they don't move around the page, as I've noticed. It's just that tracking changes a little bit or something. So you may see a headline that moves or something like that, but nothing that can't be fixed with a click. So I've been absolutely amazed at it. It's the best thing I've seen in terms of convert, InDesign files from something to something else.
Wow. Yeah. And just so people know.
Several other formats besides Affinity too.
Right. Exactly. Go to InDesign to QuarkXPress, InDesign to Affinity, InDesign to Illustrator.
So yesterday, people were asking all kinds of questions in the webinar. And so someone wrote in, people were saying, well, I'm going to switch from InDesign to Affinity. And I'd say, well, get the Markzware product because you can go into InDesign and save all your files as IDMLs, but that's going to take forever. Just get it and just use it to convert all your files to IDMLs. Right. But then someone wrote in and said, do they have a product that converts my Quark files to Affinity? And I said, you can get the Q2 ID if it's still out there.
Yeah.
Work InDesign.
Yeah.
Convert them to InDesign, and then use the new product and convert the InDesign files to Affinity.
Yeah. Well, great. That's a great one, Kevin. I'll give you a tip because we do have a new product. We're in the process. Markzware's in the process of switching everything over to the Markz line, as we call it. So IDMarkz. We're having a PDF Markz coming out, which we'll get you a copy because you can let us know.
Sure.
And we have QXPmarkz, which is replacing Q to ID.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that'll take Quark files and open them in Affinity or open them in InDesign, etc. So very interesting.
I didn't get a check. One person asked if you had anything that would convert PageMaker files to Affinity files. And I had to laugh a little bit because, I think I started teaching PageMaker in the 80s, in the late 80s.
Yeah.
So, it's been around a long time.
Yeah, we get asked every so often, and I got an old computer here somewhere where we can help them out and convert some files, but
sure, yeah.
By and large, we don't get asked too much about that. But they're still out there, those users. It's amazing, or those files.
They were still selling PageMaker 2 years ago. I don't know if they still are, but they found out there was a big market in the church secretary market.
Wow.
The church people buying it because it was only $99, and they were buying it. Was still a good program.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I mean, I know you do a lot with churches, and we get a lot of church documents and of all sorts,
Yeah.
It's amazing the amount of material that's created for churches and schools, of course. Schools and churches a lot.
I used to own a company. Now, this was in the 90s. I used to own a company, and we did newsletters for churches. And we had over 2,000 churches that did the newsletters.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a big market.
Yeah, amazing. The other things about IDMarkz you want to mention before I ask you?
No, I can't think of anything off the bat. Like I said, it works as it's advertised, which is just great. And I use it, and this is not true of most things. I haven't used your all's Q2 ID or any of those things in years, But since I've gotten it, I've used it just about every day for something.
Wow.
Something comes up and it comes in handy. Yeah.
That's a great. What I like about IDMarkz, which are other conversion products I've never had, is that it gives you that preview of the file before you click open.
It's incredible. It is really good. It is really good. Yeah, you've got all the different formats that you can convert it to. And then you take this file and I want it to go to this. You see that preview, and it's just fantastic. You see just what it's going to look like. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Which is especially for old files.
What it does is internally it ends up converting everything to an IDML file, and then converts it to what it needs to convert it to. I can see that happening.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the last question, of course, Kevin, is: would you recommend IDMarkz for potential users?
I was going to jokingly say no, but of course I would. I have in several columns now, so
yeah.
I've probably sold a lot of copies of it for you so far. If they haven't bought it yet, they will soon. But it's a great product. I was going to say it's the best product you've ever put out, but the truth is, Q2ID, I've sold hundreds of copies of that, if not thousands, because I have been to so many publications, especially 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That were converting from Quark to InDesign, and I would always say, you got to get this before I get there.
Yeah.
You convert everything over to InDesign. Yeah.
Well,
so that was a great product. Of course, Flightcheck is in the PDF, and I'm sure it's still very valuable. But in the early PDF days, when printers got so many bad PDF files.
Oh yeah.
It was just a savior.
Well, what's amazing, Kevin, is that the top 10 pre-flight problems from 20 years ago are pretty much the same then as today.
Oh, I know they are. I still teach classes on how to make the perfect PDF file.
Yeah.
And, the truth is, I haven't had a PDF file print wrong since 93.
Yeah.
If you make them correctly, they're always going to print correctly. There's nothing anybody can do to mess up. But people just don't know how to make them correctly. So,
garbage in, garbage out,
Exactly, yeah.
So, and on that note, we're coming out with a new Flightcheck hopefully early next year, like all these new Markz line, it'll have first a preview and then a pre-flight, which has long been a request in Flightcheck to have first a preview, like a soft proof, if you would, and then the pre-flight report.
Are most of your folks who are getting pre-flight these days printers? You get a lot of them from printers, or are you getting them from designers as well?
Yeah, we actually have more designers nowadays than printers. A lot of high-end book publishers or people working with book publishers,
Yeah.
Because if you get in a huge this isn't a book, but you have a huge book with all high quality imagery. Yeah, you don't want to risk. So.
We use a lot of the major book printers for our company, and they tell me all the time, "How come your books always print perfectly?" And so I guess they still get a lot of them that don't.
Yeah. Excellent. So you would recommend IDMarkz, and
sure.
We really appreciate you taking the time to let everyone know about your experiences with IDMarkz.
Yeah, I'd say it's one of the best. What is it? $99? US, it's $99.
Yeah.
I'd say it's one of the best $99 that a person can spend. Yeah.
Wow.
In design world. And I think there's also, I believe I may be wrong. I believe that's an annual price, but they can buy a permanent license for it or something like that. I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, $99 is the subscription, 12-month subscription, and $149 is the perpetual, as we call it.
Yeah, I'd go ahead and get the $149 for sure.
Yeah, then you have it. Yeah. Well, great, Kevin. Thank you so very much for taking the time to. I could ask you a million more questions about your background, and maybe some other day we can. But right now, I know you're busy, so.
It is a crazy day today. It sure is.
Yeah.
Technical problems. Can you believe it?
Well, Kevin, thank you so very much. I'm going to leave a link down below with all your web addresses that are relevant here, and to your January, what was it, 10th or 15th?
January 15th.
InDesign to Affinity.
I'll send an email with my relevant links so you'll have it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And thank you again. You have a great day.
Hey, great talking to you, David. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, Kevin. Thank you.
Take care.
If you need a quick conversion, everything will be fine. Click the button, get converted, it's easy as pie. You think long ago, makes you wonder why. Now your documents converted while you stare at the sky. Markzware, baby, Markzware. Just think of all the tasks that make your time bleed. Our conversion tools are what you really need.